Hi, everyone. My name is Al. I'm the director of fundraising at the Tor Project. Companies don't hesitate to share information for profit. Our data is shared without our permission from sources like our healthcare provider and our employers. Even basic entertainment apps collect everything they can from our devices and sell that data to others. And something that we're seeing at the Tor Project is that VPNs are a centralized product, and there's a problem inherent in that. VPN companies are also selling data. They're selling user data flows that they think might be anonymous, but isn't actually. We're also seeing we're seeing governments establish VPN companies themselves, outlaw all other VPNs in the country, and then sell subscriptions to their citizens, which is an effort to gain essentially a backdoor access to what people are doing online. And that's really the core of what I'm here to talk about today, which is the problem of centralization on the internet. In the early days of the internet, we thought that we envisioned an optimistic, decentralized, democratic way to share information where everybody's voice was able to be heard. We are dealing with several companies that dominate the internet, and that idealistic vision of an open, decentralized place to gather just doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that the internet is inherently bad or that the internet can't have positive impacts or hasn't had positive impacts. It just means that we're dealing with a problem of power in too few hands. We have a free internet, as in we can use all these services. We can use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter for free. But we don't have an open internet because we're always being followed around by data collection tools and by cross-site tracking and by cookies. And you really can't have openness when you are constantly being followed. Ultimately, all this data is collected because it makes money. It's used to disrupt the trust in information, and it's used to try to influence political outcomes. And because this data produces so much value, it's become totally baked into the way that most of the internet works today. And this model is also informing how our governments conduct surveillance. Actually, our governments are using this model to outsource their surveillance. They're able to lean on companies to buy this data, and they don't have to do their own surveillance. They can go outside of the law, outside of legal frameworks to do this. Probably a lot of you in the room have heard of Tor if you're an extremely online person or if you just care about privacy. But I realize that when people say Tor, you don't always know what exactly that means. So there's sort of three ways when I say Tor, what I really mean is we have an ecosystem of tools built on top of our decentralized distributed network, which is run by 7,000 volunteers. We have our nonprofit organization called the Tor Project. And finally, we have a huge community of volunteers. That's not just relay operators, but translators, people who run UX research, people who build community and do advocacy, people who care a lot about privacy online and want this to continue. So, onion services, what does that mean? What are they? Pretend you're the person in the middle, surfing the internet. You're not connected through Tor. There are a bunch of different entities that can actively and passively suck up the data that you are creating as you move around the internet. Tor allows you to neutralize many of those threats. They still see that you are using Tor and that you're connecting from Tor, but you essentially become much less valuable because you're in a pool of hundreds of thousands and millions of other people who are using the same network. You look very similar to a lot of other traffic. And that makes you much less valuable to a data broker. Your traffic is just not that interesting when it's not personalized, and you can't be broken down into a little marketing category. And it's why we designed onion services. This is a harm reduction mechanism to stop traffic from ever leaving the Tor network so that you don't ever have to leave the network and go to that server that's been compromised. Onion services are a leave no trace approach to browsing and publishing on the internet. And that is why organizations like the BBC, the New York Times, ProPublica, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter before Elon, and hundreds of other privacy-focused apps are using onion services to provide this hardened privacy for their users. Tor was founded in 2006, and our co-founders, Nick and Roger, experimented with a lot of different ideas. How are we going to build this digital public infrastructure, and how are we going to keep it going and keep it free and open? And they decided on a traditional NGO structure. This has a lot of benefits for the public. We have to be adhering to our mission. We can't just one day decide we're going to sell user data now because it's profitable. We have to be open and transparent about our financials. We have to be open and transparent about how our organization works. But ultimately, running as a nonprofit is extremely challenging. This is where public funding comes in, public goods funding comes in. Ultimately, the point of all of this is that funding digital public infrastructure and digital public goods is a collective effort. It's not going to happen because a government decides to open a fund. You know, it has to be a collective effort. And it really makes the open web, it makes open privacy, it makes open source projects possible to have this flexible and fast funding. Ultimately, this has an impact on the public. Like, this is not just about building a piece of software that exists only on the internet. This is about helping people. All of this privacy matters because it matters in real life. It impacts real people. It impacts everyday situations. And funding digital public infrastructure makes all of this possible. So please come talk to Tor. We love to talk about funding. We love to talk about new ideas. And we love to talk about what other projects are doing. Thank you so much.